Well, Rich, the headlines really say it all. The cover-up, power failure, and now time to tear it down. A call for the statue of Joe Paterno, Penn State's beloved and deceased football coach, to be removed. Day after that bombshell child sex abuse report, the Penn State community is trying to come to grips with it. The independent report from former FBI Director Louis Freeh says the legendary football coach and other top school officials concealed the wrongdoing by Jerry Sandusky. They were worried more, said Freeh, about the school's image than the victims.
Our most saddening and sobering finding is the total disregard for the safety and welfare of Sandusky's child victims by the most senior leaders at Penn State. The most powerful men at Penn State failed to take any steps for 14 years to protect the children who Sandusky victimized.
Now, two of the four leaders named in the Freeh report, Senior Vice President Gary Schultz and Athletic Director Tim Curley, are already awaiting criminal trial, but calls are now growing for additional criminal charges. Jeffrey Fritz, an attorney for one of Sandusky's victims, believes former state president Graham Spainer should face criminal charges as well. Curley and Schultz are charged with lying to a grand jury and failing to report the incident to law enforcement authorities. A trial date has not been set. And, of course, the trial for Jerry Sandusky, Rich, has already been conducted, and he's behind bars.
That's right here. Andrew, thank you very much. And joining us now to sound off, Gerald Filardi, a former Penn State linebacker, Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, and we've all met Andrew. Now, Gerald, for those who are casual football fans, Penn State, one of the bedrock college programs in America, won national titles. And I can't think of really anybody with a perspective better than yours to talk about what it was like to play there and also some of the principles involved. Penn State famous, as I said, they won titles, but famous for its defense. And more than that, it was known as linebacker U. You not only played, you started at linebacker. Your coordinator was Jerry Sandusky. Your head football coach, Joe Paterno. How do you feel about your alma mater when you learned about what went on for, as the report said, by the former FBI director for 14 years, a child predator roamed free here, and nobody in authority did anything to stop him?
Right. My first reaction, I'm in disbelief. You know, it's very hard to comprehend. Jerry Sandusky was my direct coach, was somebody that I interacted with on a daily basis, and did not have an inkling of the type of man that he's turned out to be today. I would have never expected it, or nor would anybody. I think a lot of people were fooled or a little bit naive, maybe some others that, you know, the parents, obviously the victims, they have their case, and it's no longer allegations. He's been convicted. So it's unbelievable the things that are coming out and the way the things that were handled. So it's hard, based on what the program and what we've been through and what we built there, it's hard to believe. And unfortunately, in situations like this, there's innocent people that get hurt. So I think there's an innocent alumni and there's innocent athletes at that school right now, particularly on the football team, that are falling upon an unfortunate situation.
I want to talk about what penalties there should be, and there's good and legitimate debate about that. We debated it even at this table, and there's hardly consensus. But what I want to talk about this segment is Joe Paterno. Listen, I'm a big fan of Penn State, okay? But you got a different perspective because you wore the uniform and you were there. It wasn't just like a sheet of paper like some of us got when we left college and we got our diploma. Right. There was a motto. He was an institution. 60 years the guy was there. They built statues, libraries with his name on it. Right. Are you having trouble reconciling that the guy who expected and demanded so much of you, from voluminous detail, he lied under oath to the grand jury? He knew since '98, it turns out, that this guy had improper relations to kids. And then when you read about the reports in 2001, when McQueary comes to him, says what he saw in the shower, he goes to somebody. Then we learn from the emails 2 days later, after they were ready to go to the authorities, he said, you know what, let's not. Let's talk about this. And publicity, bad publicity, dictated the actions. And nobody checked on the kid. They didn't find out the kid's name. Right. They didn't find out if the kid was all right. They didn't find out if the kid was dead. I don't care if it's 60 years. We're sitting at this table. you can't reconcile what happened to innocent children. You're a dad like me. Imagine if it was our kid. I mean, can you still think about Joe Paterno without thinking enabler here in the first sentence?
I can't. You know, it is something that comes to mind. Obviously, it's hard for me being a part of it to separate the two at this point. So there's a lot of information that I'm gathering and processing at this time. But, you know, there are victims here. And my concern is those innocent people of Penn State that did things the right way. And that's us as the alumni, the staff that we built. Right. You know, Joe was there and he was there for a long time, but they can't take away the hard work we've put in, the reasons why we went to Penn State and did what we did, and success with honor. We carried that, and I still believe that today. Now, if you ask me what Joe did, can I say at this point, I can't believe it. It's not the man that I knew, and would I expect him to react that way? Absolutely not.
And
but
systemically, Gerald, he talks about in the margins in his notes liability concerns. You know, if we let him back, you know, with the kids in the campus. And then years after it, more kids were abused. You know, one word came up in Louis Freeh's thing that we went through, guys, and he talked about a culture. And one of the jarring quotes was from, I think it's full screen 5 if you have it, guys, from the janitor. And apparently these guys eyewitnessed something, and this was a Korean war vet who said he'd never seen anything like it, even compared it to wartime. But they couldn't come forward because it's like going against the President of the United States. Right. Nobody can go against the football program here. And he talked about how much power Joe Paterno had, and that if he went against it, going against the program would have been basically the end of them all. Right. Being there firsthand, was the football program just that powerful? Was Joe Paterno seen as more important than anybody, including the president?
I can't say that it was that powerful. Yes, it was powerful. It was over time, but I think, you know, Penn State College is a small town. I mean, it's basically, they're in a bubble. So when you go for so long with nothing happening, no allegations, no, you know, football scandals, things like that, of doing the right thing, a lot of people get complacent. They're sitting back, and there's a lot of trust there. Everybody does things a certain way, and that's the way they carry themselves.
Do you get the sense, though, that if a kid got out of line, the PD would first check with the program as to whether or not, you know, turn them over the program and make them run wind sprints instead of getting written up, that if it was one of these guys on campus? No.
If it was one of us, we were in trouble more than the outside person. That's the way things were handled there. That's if I did something wrong and it was known about, we would be handled extremely more because of that light that we were in. And that's the way Joe looked at it. So for the people out there, the janitors, the people, I don't know why anybody didn't stand up when the time was right.
So many. When you read the report, so many did for so long. And I know we'll talk punishment, guys, in the next segment. Did you guys want to, Andrew and Dominic, jump in?
I mean, I'm not really sure what there is to say. It's horrible what happened, and clearly there is a culture within the football program.
Well, that was the word that Louis Freeh said in his conclusion, that there needs to be a culture change.
But again, and I've made this point before, I would argue that there is that culture at any big-time university sports program. And granted, we hope that in most cases it doesn't lead to or allow for the kinds of horrible activities that happened via Jerry Sandusky. But there are still petty crimes and misdemeanors that are being allowed and swept under the rug at lots of big-time college programs.
What I'm curious about, Coach Sandusky, amongst the defensive players, was he considered a man's man by the players, an honorable man? What was his image amongst the players?
A man's man. He was more of a big kid to us, friendly. You can talk to him, joke around with him. But he was there for your players, cared for you, wanted to make sure you were on the right track, doing the right things. So he was always there for us.
And no signs. I mean, oftentimes with pedophiles, you can notice that they like to play with little children.
Apparently he showered with children even before '98 when the first allegations came to light.
I tell you, no sign. That from me or players that I've played with, that I've talked to, we all had never even said once, yeah, you know what, that one time, there was no one time. There was never anything. In my years of being there and knowing Jerry, there wasn't anything. Now, some people may have other opinions or had experiences, but for me and the people that I know, no.